Guys, we have reached the end of the NFL season. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk about the Patriots for 15 minutes again this week. We had 2 incredible conference championship games a week and a half ago, and we've got the Super Bowl coming up this weekend. This is the peak. And yet, every year, it feels like this stretch of time we're in right now between those 2 high points is one of the lowest points in the sports calendar. This awful 2-week break feels like it gets longer every single year. There were 7 glorious years when we didn't have it, when we went straight from the second biggest weekend in football to the biggest weekend in football, as logic would dictate, most recently in the stretch of Super Bowls between 2000 and 2003. But unfortunately, it appears that this is the preferred option for league officials and teams alike. As former Chiefs head coach Hank Stram once said, "I don't think anybody can prepare for a Super Bowl in 1 week. The so-called off week is more important than the week right before the Super Bowl. The off week gives the coaches time to prepare and the players time to rest." And while, sure, yeah, that's certainly true, it also gives sports media a ton of time to fill, which we do not need, because it leads to headlines like, "Look, Ric Flair is selling incredible Rams-themed shirts for Super Bowl Lee." Incredible? Is that the word we're going to go with there? Doesn't leave a lot of room for a more exciting story. The NFL actually did try to help us out in 2010 by giving us something to care about the weekend before the big game. Unfortunately, that something was the Pro Bowl. And putting the Pro Bowl between the best NFL weekends of the year is like putting Kevin Hart between LeBron and Dwayne Wade. Makes it very hard to look past the obvious shortcomings. When they moved up the game, which used to be played respectfully once all the good football was done, it actually, at first, seemed like it might work.
Judging from a sellout crowd in South Florida, it looks like the NFL got it right, moving the Pro Bowl to a week ahead of the Super Bowl this year.
It did look like they got it right, but see, what happened was that NFL fans were starving, and the league made us a Hot Pocket, which is fine at first, but after your second, and then your third, and your fourth Hot Pocket, you start to notice that even though it says pepperoni on the box, the only thing it tastes like is burning. And then you'd rather starve yourself than eat another Hot Pocket. And that's basically where we've netted out over the last few years.
Should this be the last time the Pro Bowl is played after what you saw last night?
The players made a mockery out of a football game. But if nobody wants to play it, then I don't want to watch it.
It's an absolute joke. It's a waste of time. It's not a football game. We all know it.
It's not virtually unwatchable. It is unwatchable. I'm not going to qualify this. It's done. It's dead. And I've told you guys this before. No football player loves football unconditionally. This is not basketball. This is not baseball. Ain't nobody casually playing no damn football ever in their life.
You can't have a competition
where everybody's not trying hard.
Where everybody is not trying.
Right.
Why have it?
Right.
It's totally meaningless.
Right.
Nobody cares.
You broke more of a sweat last night at dinner than they had last night on the field.
Was he eating a Hot Pocket? Because that's what I'm saying. Also, look, if the question is, would you rather watch the Pro Bowl or Peter King sweat while he eats, my answer is, why can't we have it all? Point is, the Pro Bowl stinks because no one tries. So in recent years, they've tried to incentivize trying. Under the current CBA, players actually make more money if they win the Pro Bowl than they make if they lose the Super Bowl. Yeah, it's a neat little fact that you can tell people at parties, but that extra $8,000 isn't going to do when a player suffers a devastating injury and has to say goodbye to all of his non-guaranteed contract money just because he really wanted to bring home a win for Chris Carter's live-action fantasy team. So the reasons that fans hate the Pro Bowl are somewhat unique to the nature of the game of football and the NFL's lack of guaranteed money. But the fact that fans hate it is nothing special.
If you won't say it, I'll do it for you. The NBA All-Star Weekend stinks.
This is just dumb. You have to really try to make the best athletes on earth doing incredibly fun things to watch unwatchable, but that's where we are, because somewhere in the past few years, actually trying in this game has become uncool.
Hate is not a strong enough word for me, and I'm not a hateful person.
Loathe.
I loathe it. I don't know if loathing something is
worse than hate.
Yeah, but you know what? I loathe and hate.
Hockey fans also hate their All-Star game. It was just hard to find an ESPN clip of it. Look, there are like 3 things that all of America's major sports fan bases have in common. Whining about your All-Star game, whining about the refs, and Imagine Dragons. So tonight, we are going to take a look at All-Star games because they're all really different. And when everyone is doing the same thing, but doing it differently, that usually means that no one has figured out the right way to do it, like hooking up with one of your friends. Or even making a movie about hooking up with one of your friends. The first official All-Star game ever was in 1933 when Chicago's mayor and the sports editor from the Tribune devised a plan for an event intended to foster a sense of optimism during the Great Depression. It was supposed to be a one-time event, billed as the game of the century, but it was such a hit that they decided to do it again the next year, and poof, a tradition we would one day resent every tiny detail about was born. The NHL had a one-off All-Star game of their own in 1934, and it was also related to the Great Depression in the sense that it was greatly depressing because it was a benefit game for a guy who got hit so hard earlier in the season that not only did it end his career, but a priest in the stands at that game read him his last rites.
To help pay for Bailey's recovery, the NHL came up with a novel concept, an exhibition game between the Maple Leafs and the best players selected from the rest of the league, an all-star team. The 8th Bailey benefit game raised over $20,000. It also planted the seeds for one of the league's time-honored traditions.
And also, I believe it was the last time a major sports league took responsibility for a head injury, so that's great. Smash cut forward to 1947, the All-Star Game then became an annual fixture for the NHL. And as you can see, it predated even the most famous hockey traditions like Zambonis and wearing helmets. Then in 1951, the NBA and the NFL both officially started their annual contests. Now, this is kind of interesting. At the time, the NBA had an average attendance of about 3,500 per game. Their first All-Star Game drew a crowd of over 10,000, who then spent 2 hours watching people not dunk. Exciting. But no, these games were wildly popular with fans. There was the novelty of it all, the fact that many of the lineups were decided by their fan votes, and then later in the era of TV, broadcasts of the games gave fans a rare chance to see all the big stars whose regular season games were not shown in your area.
On January 20th, the greatest players in the game gather for hockey's ultimate showcase. And on this historic night, Fox Sports is going to bring you the greatest technological breakthrough in the history of sports.
That's right. I remember that. That was the year I could finally see Gretzky, Korea, and the puck for the very first time. In the decades since then, we have absolutely turned on All-Star games as fans. And they have had to scramble to make some changes in an effort to keep up with our evolving tastes and viewing habits. They've tried switching up the format. In 2014, the NFL ditched the AFC versus NFC format for a few years, opting instead for 2 teams that were drafted by Hall of Famers like Jerry Rice and Michael Irvin in 2016. Team Irvin just barely pulled out the win that year, beating Team Rice 49-27. And the Pro Bowl went back to the traditional format the next year. The NHL messed with its format a bunch. The '98 game completely abandoned the conference versus conference format in favor of a matchup between the North American All-Stars from North America and the World All-Stars from everywhere else. They ran into 3 main problems with that. Number 1, the North American team ended up stacked because, you know, that's where Canada is. 2, it forced regular season teammates to play against one another. And 3, they called them the World All-Stars instead of the World Stars, which feels like a huge missed opportunity, but maybe not the right target audience. They went back to normal in 2003. Then, in 2016, they were like,
The NHL All-Star Game will have a completely different look this season. According to TSN, the league is scrapping its traditional 5-on-5 game and going with a new 3-on-3 mini tournament. Now, each of the NHL's 4 divisions will be represented with 10 to 12 player teams in the tournament. The Metropolitan will play the Atlantic Division, while the Pacific will play the Central Division. Both of those games being 20-minute 3-on-3 matchups, the same as the newly adopted overtime format for the regular season.
And so then the winner of those games is going to be entered into 2 identical escape rooms. And then the first team that can get out is going to get a $50 credit for their bar tab. You can't use it this time. You have to come back and use it on your next time. But it's very exciting. It's like a free bunch of apps. Leagues have also tried to switch up the voting process. Major League Baseball has had issues with actual ballot box stuffing, like Cincinnati in 1957. And also the type of ballot box stuffing that's impossible to explain to your grandparents in 2015. The NHL modified their fan vote during the first year of that 3-on-3 free-for-all because they felt it had been exploited, some might say used effectively, in years past. The fan vote would now determine the captain for each division. And since hockey fans are the best, they voted for John Scott, a guy known for beating people up who had scored exactly 0 goals that season. What followed after that was this huge mess that you may have heard of, where the NHL tried to keep him out of the game. He got traded, and then he got demoted, which made him ineligible. It was this whole big thing. The important part is that it ended in spectacular fashion.
The 2016 Honda NHL All-Star MVP scored 2 goals in the tournament and wins as a write-in candidate, John Scott!
Guys, he wasn't even one of the candidates you could vote for. They all wrote him in to be MVP. And that's why I always tell people that I feel like the 2016 election really brought us together. And they look at me like I'm crazy. That was amazing. They elected him together. What are you thinking I'm talking about? The NBA has fan voting as well. But, you know, I'll be honest. I'm skeptical about it. Because J.R. Smith didn't make it in this year. That doesn't add up for me. Because we told you guys to vote for him. And I know that you did, right? So why isn't he in it? Although the NBA will be televising the draft this All-Star game. So shout out to Rachel Nichols, first of all. But also maybe next year, you'll all listen to me so that we can watch LeBron have to not pick JR for like 6 rounds. We could have had it all, you guys. But in the NBA, to me, what they have engaged in most notably is the 3rd kind of All-Star game modification, the peripherals. All those little things that surround the main thing that are mostly useless, and then they get swapped out for another one before you know it. They're like the All-Star Game's cabinet members. Sure, baseball has the home run derby, hockey has the skills competition, the NFL is doing the whole dodgeball thing, which I'm very okay with, but the NBA has all that. The NBA is like, very timely reference here, that guy in Italian Job who like listened to you talk about all the things you wanted, and then he went out and just got all of them. There's the celebrity game, the 3-point contest, the skills contest, where the rules don't matter. Joel Embiid, what the hell was that? There's obviously the historical reenactment of Fergie's national anthem. There is the actual game, and then of course, the dunk contest, where incredibly talented athletes try to one-up each other with meticulously planned dunks, the complexity of which can only be understood by a highly qualified panel of judges.
The undisputed king of Snapchat, give it up for the one, the only, DJ Khaled.
Undisputed king of Snapchat is a really long way of telling people you've never won a Grammy. The NBA, guys, the NBA had a horse competition for 2 years. Do you remember that? Because I do, and I want it to come back. They will try anything. At this rate, by next year, they're gonna let some guys play defense. Like, you're crazy, NBA. Where are you gonna stop? My point is, you can tweak the format, you can tweak the voting process, you can tweak all your extracurriculars, and I'm sure if you spent enough time, you could find the perfect formula to produce the best all-star game possible. But the problem that we're going to keep coming back to is that the game doesn't matter. And there's really no way to change that because matter is neither created nor destroyed. That's what that means, right? Baseball tried to make it matter for a few years, and people were mad about that. Then they made it not matter anymore, and people were mad about that too. It's just that All-Star games are the product of a much simpler time when we needed more access, more content. And here, now, in this darkest current timeline, we're all set on content. We just don't need it, especially when we can tell the players don't need it either. But that's not to say that we should get rid of All-Star games. I think we should just accept them for what they are and maybe stop wasting so much airtime, this show excluded, arguing about how to fix them. They're not fixable. They're fine. The only All-Star game take that I actually agree with, and this may surprise you, is my good friend, Stephen A. Smith.
Have the ceremony. Label them all pros. Stop being so damn cheap. Fly the all-pro players and their families out to Hawaii. That's their gift for being all pros. They all get a free trip to Hawaii for the week.
Just saying, he is absolutely right. Not the part about not playing the game, the part about vacation. We all deserve a vacation. The Super Bowl is this peak of stress and emotion and probably drinking for so many of us. We can't just go back to work after that. If players get 2 weeks in between games because they need to get ready for their jobs, we deserve at least a day. Thank you. So that is why I went ahead and filed paperwork with the National Day calendar to declare the day after the Super Bowl a national holiday. And folks, I am very excited to announce we got approved. Yeah. Okay, so from here on out, the first Monday in February will officially be National Football Hangover Day. I will say, I realized after we did that there may be a Super Bowl in which like the first Monday is not the day after. We're gonna cross that bridge when we get to it. Also, I don't think this means you can just start getting the day off from work this year, but this is the first step. To be honest, the next step sounds kind of complicated and hard, so I'm into it later. My hope is that the thought of having the Super Bowl and then a day of rest will be enough to get us all through 2 long weeks of hot takes and bad football. So, happy holidays, guys.